Well, if you remember, the actual shutdown here in California, or the stay-at-home orders, went into effect about halfway through Lent this year. And I was very fortunate to be living here on the grounds of Questhaven, taking care of my mother. And so at least I could get out and spend time in nature on the trails or just being outside. And I know that some people didn't have that opportunity. But I also found myself going inward. And it was at one of the Lenten classes, I believe the last one we were able to hold here in the church, that Reverend Blake Isaac suggested sitting before the Christ and asking a question and then journaling the response that comes. And I did that for many weeks, and in fact, I spent a lot of time in contemplation and writing. Easter came, and while it was very different this year, of course, for everybody, it was still a profound time. For me, the pinnacle was at the very end of the recorded service when we heard Mahler's Resurrection, and the video was shown of the turning planet Earth and the sun coming around it. And out of that, the image of our Lord Christ, our picture here in the church, grew out of the sun until that was all you could see. It's hard for me to put into words what came to me at that time, but I felt a cleansing, a purifying effect. I felt lifted up to a new level, and when you experience that, you know you're never going to be the same again. You've passed through a threshold into a new state of being. And I think I needed that for what was to come in my life. 2 weeks later, we received word that my nearly 39-year-old nephew died suddenly, a heart attack. He's the eldest son of my older brother, and I was very close to him when he was a young boy, but over the years, his life took a different path, and although we connected occasionally, I was not really that close to him at the time of his passing. However, the love that you have for someone in your life is always there, and I am very close to my brother, and I could feel his pain. What his death brought up in me was the overwhelming pain of loss. It's that part of the human journey that none of us want to face, and yet here it was facing me. Every person that we love will one day make that journey home to the inner worlds, leaving us behind. Unless, of course, we go first. Well, so there it was, that pain that I was trying to avoid. The grief that I felt for him was not just for him, but for all loss. And I realized we can't run away from it. We can't hide from it. We just have to face it. And I found myself saying, I don't want to lose anyone else. This is too hard. I don't want to feel this pain. And yet, throughout our lifetimes, we do experience it over and over, don't we? Whether it's losing a person, a beloved pet, a loss of a dream, or even a job. Well, a couple of days after receiving that news, I opened up the daily emails that I get from the Center for Action and Contemplation that Richard Rohr heads up, and this is what I read. It was entitled, "The Presence of Spirit." Many things can bring us to the threshold of our ordinary ways of thinking and behaving, but even good rituals are merely stand-ins until reality itself, often in the form of great love or great suffering, steps in and changes us forever. My friend Paula D'Arcy, with whom I have taught many times over the years, lost her husband and young daughter in a tragic car accident while she was pregnant with their second child. This story from Paula reveals how liminal moments can occur at any time. So Paula writes, "One afternoon, my heart breaking, I began sorting through the clothes my daughter Sarah would never wear. A dress lay across my lap, a little piece of white cotton. It evoked one more moment of bitter tears and confused disbelief. Life was not supposed to turn out this way. It was such an innocent and common thing, a child's garment, yet even as it broke my heart, that dress became an opening. The soft cotton tore at me from within and began to empty me. You are not the only heartbroken parent in the world," it said. The pain of loss is not yours alone. Disappointment is the human condition. I continue to stare at the cotton and lace, but something had shifted. The dress was somehow connecting me to the texture and mystery of greater things. Without fully understanding why, I began to soften. I saw life's contour, its density and its brilliance, just as it is, nothing more. I saw how I'd been caught up in a script of my own creation and was totally caught up in my own world, my emotions, my wants, and my needs. Now it was simply my time, my turn to know the darkness and discover whether or not I was brave enough to accept the human journey and find a way through. I slowly began to see within the cells of every living thing is the same essence, the presence of spirit. The heart of our journey is to awaken to this spirit within. I guess we would call that the divine presence within each one of us. Hardly anything turns out the way you expected it to, and you're frequently ready to write life off as too paradoxical and too difficult to endure. Then some indescribable light fights its way through the impenetrable dark. An unpredictable, unimportant, runaway moment that lights up everything you've been unable to see until then. That light removes all the shoulds and oughts, all the illusions about fairness. You enter liminal space. In that space, you take your first script, and Richard Rohr said in parentheses, or what I call your false or separate self, and we might call the personality self here, the one that weighs 500 pounds, the script that was cutting into your heart all along, bleeding you to death, but you didn't realize the wound or its seriousness. And you simply let it go. I thought that was such a beautiful expression of somebody going through that grieving process and being able to come into the light with it. Well, liminal space. This is the second time that I come across these words in one of Richard Rohr's emails. And I don't think I've heard those words anywhere else. So what does it mean? Liz gave us a preview. There is a website, liminalspace.org, and on it I read that the word liminal comes from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold, any point or place of entering or beginning. A liminal space is the time between what was and the next. It's a place of transition, a season of waiting and not knowing. I have thought about why Richard Rohr said that it often comes at times of great love or great suffering. And to me, these are times that we are most open to the divine. With great love, we feel gratitude for this wonderful feeling that we're having, for the feeling of support that we get from one another. And when we feel great suffering, we're more apt to cry out for help from something beyond ourselves. And I think what Paula D'Arcy was saying in her writing is that in this liminal space, we try to rise above the personality selves and let our souls be bathed in the divine light. Particularly when we are on the spiritual path, and here at Questhaven being on the Christian mysticism, our source of healing and inspiration comes from our connection with God, our Creator, as well as the Lord Christ. And these opportunities are often brought to us for our spiritual growth.